Hey, welcome everyone. We're really excited today to have Patrick Megaro here on the Attorney Success Podcast. Patrick is a senior partner at Halscott Megaro, and he began his legal career in 2001 at the Legal Aid Society Criminal Defense Division in Manhattan, New York as a public defender. And at Legal Aid, Patrick represented hundreds of clients charged with misdemeanors and major felony offenses, gaining invaluable trial experience fighting in court daily for the rights of clients in the area of criminal law. He's known as the lawyer's lawyer, which is so important. So he's able to help others with great information, and other lawyers frequently contact him for advice and guidance on legal matters, case management, and has mentored junior lawyers since 2004, training some of the best criminal defense and appellate attorneys in the nation. Patrick is married with 3 sons, is a military vet, and resides in Orlando, Florida with his family. He's an avid outdoorsman, and he enjoys hunting, competitive shooting, CrossFit, coaching his son's baseball team, and training his 2 lab retrievers. And you also played rugby, which is great. So good to have you here, Patrick.
Well, it's nice to be on. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So let's just jump right in really with what got you into, pursuing a career in law. Everyone has a lot of different reasons that gets them in, some earlier than others. Was there an event in your life or something to push you toward this path?
Sure. A series of events, most of which started with my mother telling me when I was growing up, you know what, you really know how to beat a dead horse. You should be a lawyer because you're very good in wearing people down and convincing them. But there was an event in my life in college where I ran afoul of the law, and I hired an attorney who happened to be one of my fraternity brothers' older brothers. And I was very impressed with the way he handled himself. And I said to him one day, you know what? I think I'd like to do what you do. And that's when I decided to pursue a career in law. I'd been a history major and secondary education major and had my heart set on teaching history. Mm-hmm. And my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, said, yeah, you know what? You'd probably make a lot more money as a lawyer. Why don't you become a lawyer? And really kind of pushed me towards law school. So that was 22 years ago, and here I am.
Right on. What was it? So when you were represented by your friend, what was it? Was there something specifically that he did as an attorney that really made him stand out from others?
Not really. I mean, it's just the whole atmosphere, the action, the drama that I saw. I was always into crime fiction. And I remember in the 90s, we had a lot of these high-profile cases. We had the O.J. Simpson case. You had the John Benet Ramsey case. You had the Menendez brothers, the John Wayne Bobbitt case. All of these things really just fascinated me. And I knew that if I wanted to go into law, it would probably be criminal law.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely, it seems to be one of the most interesting. And of course, that's where what you see in movies and everything else. But so what is it about criminal law? What's the one thing that really kind of gets you going and keeps you going? Because I know it's stressful. We talk, you've got lots of stuff going on, everyone does, but you particularly have had some things going on, but there's got to be that drive that gets you out and keeps going every day.
A lot of it is really the ability to use my skills to take away something from, the evil government, which is always trying to screw the poor common man. So for example, when I represent clients in New York, the case is called the people of the state of New York against, whoever, Mr. Jones. All 24 million people against one man.
Right.
And the only thing standing between 23 million people and Mr. Jones is yours truly.
Right.
I love going up against those odds and squeezing out a win and getting something that I know that the government doesn't want me to get. And the other thing that really gets me going is, as a history major and a history buff, is always very much into constitutional law and constitutional rights and recognizing that people have died and laid their lives down so that you and I and everyone else out there can enjoy those rights. Mm-hmm. And they're so important to me that it's incumbent upon me as an attorney to protect those rights on behalf of people that can't protect themselves.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting you say too. I wouldn't have thought about that, like the people against this person, and what kind of the symbolism behind that and how that makes somebody feel if they are being accused of something, and it's, hey, me against the world, and especially a New York or, any place, really doesn't matter. But that's important. Yeah, that's a really good piece.
Even more profound when it's the United States of America against somebody. It's,
right.
Last census was 330 million. We're going to find out this year how many more millions it's grown, but 400 million people against one person.
Right.
And who's going to stop them?
Right.
Me.
Hey, and it's words, right? Words are important. And we think, well, that's just the way that they position these cases, but it really is. And you wonder then, are things skewed in that sense, and that it's, it's you versus everybody right now. So that's interesting. That's very good. So when it comes to law, I know it can be really intimidating, not just for you as an attorney and trying to keep up with everything and all the laws as they change, but also the person, if somebody gets in trouble. What's the biggest misconception that you think that people see in the marketplace?
The biggest misconception
that you see. Yeah.
Sure. The biggest problem or the biggest misconception is that people try to compare their case against someone else's case. And one of the things that I hear, and it's almost a joke within the legal communities, I know people that, killed other people and got less time than, my brother or my son or my boyfriend or whoever.
Right.
And the thing with that is totally wrong. It's a completely wrong perception, because a criminal case is like a snowflake. There's no two in the world that are just like it. There's only one, and the facts themselves, when multiple people are charged as co-defendants in the same case, they couldn't be worlds apart sometimes.
Right.
So that's the biggest misconception, is trying to compare what people see on TV to what's going on in their real life. And I would equate that to when you pass a billboard or an advertisement on the side of the bus where it says a personal injury lawyer got me $20 million, and somebody who sprained their finger thinks that, oh, well, they got $20 million, I should get $20 million. Same kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, and then you probably find people, there's so much information now on the internet, which is, in your industry, this can be bad. It's good and bad. Medical industry, think, WebMD, people go into a doctor and they think they already know what's wrong. Come to find out it was not even close. In my industry, a little bit, right? There's a lot of information on marketing, different ways of doing it, but I can imagine with law, it's huge. Watching movies, seeing things on the news, seeing, like you said, a billboard, and then you have to fight that because someone comes and probably tries to tell you, hey, I saw this, can't we do this? Or can't, trying to see if they can persuade you in doing something that's probably not a good fit.
Right, and there's a huge disconnect between the Facebook experts and reality, because one of the things that lawyers have to deal with, and people who don't practice law don't realize this, is that you have the law over here, which is this idealistic body of truth, right? Mm-hmm. That's up here, and down here is reality and how that law is applied or misapplied to screw the common man. So you have what should be versus what actually is and what happens on a daily basis. And those two are very, very different sometimes. They couldn't be more worlds apart. Part of the problem that a lawyer has is trying to explain to the client that, I know this is the way things should be, but this is the way things are.
Right. It's got to be tough information to talk to somebody about. Right. It's like
you have to know all the angles. That's the hard part.
Yeah, definitely. So it's a lot of strategy, obviously, knowing the law, knowing the strategy, knowing the person. So you're working with people, which is one of the hardest things, right? People's emotions, and in your case, people's lives, livelihood, lives, their futures. So, yeah. Well,
it's really a study of psychology, because when you're a trial attorney, you have to try to predict how are people going to react to this.
Right.
How are people going to respond if my facial expression is messed up, or if I'm wearing the wrong color tie, or if my client looks a certain way, or if he puts on a happy face versus a sad face. These are all things that you have to prepare for. And in the appellate world, when you're doing appeals, you have to predict how are judges going to react to this kind of argument. What's the best way to approach this? What's the way to kind of tiptoe around this, or do I just go straight in, bull rush this full force? Every situation is different.
Right. Is that something where you're trying to do some research on the judges and obviously on anyone else that's going to be combative with you, but to do that so you have one approach for this person, one approach for that person?
Exactly. You have to know your audience. You always have to know your audience as an attorney.
Right. Which changes all the time. So tell me about your ideal case and client. What is that like perfect person? If you could package them up, this is who you love to serve. You love to help them out of this particular situation. Who's that?
The ideal client is someone like Donald Trump with oodles of money to burn and no a bottomless pit of finances and resources.
Right.
Unfortunately, those are few and far between, because I will tell you a story on that. I represented a client here in Orlando, and actually the civil case is ongoing because the criminal case concluded in his favor. But the ideal client here was a person with no criminal record, a pillar of the community, and who had almost a bottomless pit of resources to hire the expert witnesses, to put together the defense, the patience to do it, and the wherewithal to make this all happen, who's an intelligent guy, is an intelligent guy. And we outspent the state of Florida in expert witnesses, and ultimately were able to convince the prosecutor that the complaining witness who was accusing my client of some horrible sexual misconduct was completely and totally lying. Mm-hmm. Not because just of what he said, but just because of all of this forensic evidence that we're able to gather. And my client told me, you know, if I was some poor kid who lived in the projects and was represented by a public defender, I would never be able to afford this. And that has not been lost on me. So we have a guy who is, you know, you consider a very conservative Republican, realizing this sort of liberal stance that justice is not always equal.
Right.
But that's the ideal situation, is a person who has that. Then you have the other extreme, is the person who's poor and can't afford anything, and where most people fall between is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And as a lawyer, you have to make do with what you have.
Yeah, that's got to be tough though. When you know that there's so much information you can get, but the resources just aren't there to get it, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Right? It's
not much. And I would tell people, you know, if I could solve the money problem, I wouldn't be a lawyer. I'd be a banker. But that's one problem I don't have a solution to.
Right. Right. So what's one of your most memorable cases? Is that one, or is there something else that really stands out for you?
That's one of them. That's one of my top ones. Another one is it's another case study in effective use of resources. But my client had been accused of blowing up cars on the Upper West Side of Manhattan in August of 2004, and he was captured on video surveillance from an apartment building across the street where this occurred on 2 separate occasions, supposedly lighting these fires. There was no mistaking that it was him on the video, because my client looked exactly like Santa Claus, you know, long white beard, long white hair.
Yep.
Actually, a pretty interesting fellow. He was and I'm speaking in the past tense because unfortunately he's dearly departed, but he was a classical concert pianist, had been known all over the world for playing the biggest venues in the world: Vienna, Lincoln Hall, Carnegie Hall, or Lincoln Center rather, Carnegie Hall, all the big places you can imagine. And, you know, there he is on video blowing up cars for whatever reason. I was able to secure the #1 video expert in the nation, who's since retired, and he was the guy that the U.S. government used to hire to authenticate the Osama bin Laden videos and the high-ranking Al-Qaeda operative audio. And this man cost a lot of money.
I can imagine.
But when I was very skeptical, because my client was saying, it's not me, I didn't do this. This is all conspiracy.
And you're looking at it saying, well,
the expert, and he says, your client is right. This video has been completely doctored, and brought me into his laboratory, which looked like the bridge on the Starship Enterprise, and showed me, turning all these knobs and dials, exactly how this video had been culled together. And we went to trial, and the jury was out. I had that expert testify. My jury was out to deliberate only long enough to get a free lunch before they came back and acquitted him. And you could hear the prosecutor's jaw hit the table.
I bet.
What do you mean? He's on video. How could you acquit him? Well, there you go.
There you go. That's right. Wow. I mean, that again, resources, right? So it's good to have them there. Unfortunately, not everyone has it, but at least there's a case where someone who did have it had access to it. So that's interesting. I mean,
it goes
that
back to what
seems
I
like
was saying
something out of a
earlier.
movie too, right there. But
Exactly. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier, all 350 million people in the United States of America against you. Well,
right,
guess what Uncle Sam has that nobody else has, is this unending, limitless pit of money
yep,
that it can spend with hiring investigators and experts to go out and try and get the evidence to create a case against a person.
right,
And sometimes you really have to fight fire with fire. And the more we get into the situation where there's ring cameras and video surveillance
yeah,
cameras everywhere, the more you're fighting against that kind of thing,
yeah,
and you're at an extreme disadvantage.
right, yeah, yeah. I mean, technology can be on your side, but it certainly can play both ways. So, um,
Right.
so right now, in terms of your business, and you might not have any challenges here, but what challenges do you find in attracting new cases, and particularly cases that you would really identify as solid cases you would love to take on? What are some of the challenges there?
The biggest challenge is always finances. And at this stage of my career, I'm doing more appellate work and post-conviction work than I am trial work. I've done 50 jury trials in my career, and a jury trials for a lawyer is sort of like smoking a pack of cigarettes. It takes a few months off the end of your life. So by my count, I smoked 50 packs of cigarettes. I'm probably given back several years of my life. So I've moved to the appellate side.
Okay.
The challenge is when people come to me at this stage, disaster has already struck. And a lot of times they've exhausted a lot of resources, and financing becomes an issue because you have to have enough money to go the distance and fight. And the appeals process can be extremely long. It can be extremely expensive. And you have to have that stamina or that endurance to really go the distance, because otherwise the government is always going to win. They'll just wait for you to tap out. And
Right.
a lot of people tap out, and that's the problem.
Right. Well, I mean, it's similar to someone that has cancer, and they're, the insurance companies, they can get, I mean, they've got it down to a science, how much they can get out of you, who's suffering from this because they know you've got a limit, and you're going to hit that limit, and then that's it. But sadly, it is playing with someone's lives too, like this. If they're going through and they just don't have the resources, but there's a valid reason to appeal, there is something stopping, and it's just it's finances. And like you said, New York versus you, and tough to beat. So it's a David and Goliath type process.
Right. It's David and Goliath, not only fighting, but also running, a marathon.
Right. Yeah, exactly. You have to go and go and go and have the endurance for it. So what percentage of cases do you think you've seen that just can't go the distance because of that? Just for financial reasons, resources, they just can't further?
Unfortunately, a majority. A lot of people come to me when it's too late. They've exhausted a lot of other avenues of relief. They've tried it on their own. They've tried to represent themselves. And it is an extremely bewildering process, even for lawyers that are not trained in this, or lawyers that have some, experience in appeals. It's bewildering enough for them. I can't imagine what it would be for a person who's never had the benefit of law school or having gone through this before.
Right.
And a lot of times mistakes are made, and appeals are in a great sense, sort of like a connect the dots. If you miss one of those first couple of dots and you connect them wrong, the picture is going to be all wrong in the end.
Right.
And that's really kind of how the appellate process, if you screw something up early on, it's going to wreck everything down the line.
Right.
That is one of the other challenges. And people don't know this, unfortunately, until it's too late sometimes.
Does it happen pretty often? Let's say somebody's trying to represent themselves and they've done something that has really put a wrench in the works without knowing it, obviously, and then it comes to you, like, I don't know that we can fix this. This has already been out. It's already been said. It's already out there. It's evidence, whatever that is, right?
Yeah, well, before I jumped on this Zoom call today, I was working on that exact same scenario.
Really?
Where my client we're at the 7th or 8th stage of the appeal, and he'd made a terrible error at like the 2nd stage of the appeal, trying to represent himself. And I am in the position where I'm trying to clean up the mess and put Humpty Dumpty back together again.
Right.
And it's no easy task. And, it just goes back to that old saying, which I think was Benjamin Franklin said this, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yep. Yep. How often do you see people are representing themselves? I mean, is it strictly a money thing? They just initially go into it and think, I just can't afford an attorney, but then they wind up going with an attorney and more damage is done.
It's a mix. A lot of times, most of the time, people who are representing themselves are doing so out of desperation because they just don't have the resources, or they don't have the family that has resources.
Right.
In a minority of cases, it's the person just doesn't trust any attorneys because they may have been through the system themselves and they've been burned by attorneys or had unpleasant experiences in the past, and they think that it won't be any different this time. And in a very, very small number of cases, you have the person who's like a Ted Bundy who thinks he's smarter than everybody and can do it all himself. Those are very few and far between. It's just like everything else. Money makes the world go around. It always comes down to an issue of resources.
Sure. Right. So what's one piece of advice you wish you were given when you started your career?
Go into medicine.
Don't say start another career. Be a doctor. look at your wall. You've probably got 3 or 4 PhDs.
One piece of advice I wished that I had been given when I started this was to stay in a job as long as humanly possible in order to gather as much experience as you possibly can. I left legal aid a little earlier than I wanted to because there was a budget crunch and they were starting to issue layoff notices. And I instead of writing that out, I thought, you know what, the grass is greener on the other side of the fence.
Right.
I wish somebody grabbed me by the throat and said, no, stay there for another year or 2,
right,
so that I wouldn't have to make the kinds of mistakes I made in private practice as I did in public practice, in the public sector. But at the end of the day, lawyers always learn on the backs of their clients, for better or for worse. Right. And I was fortunate enough not to make too many errors early on, and I was fortunate enough to learn from other people's errors. That's another thing that people never told me. Don't only learn from your own mistakes, watch others and learn from theirs so you don't make the same mistake.
Right. Well, in that sense too, that's why we put this podcast together too, for other people that they're just getting started or they're having some struggles and they need some other, outside information in the industry to help. It's the same with any business. You want to get it out there. You get excited. You obviously have big goals. You want to hit those goals, but how often do we actually hit those goals? So all sorts of things can get in the way, and money makes things work. When you have the resources, it's a lot easier to get things going, not just with clients and that, but just getting the business going, paying for staff to help out, paying for the resources that you need, the right equipment, the right, whatever that is that you need in your business. So that's good. Yeah. I think that makes sense though, to stick with it a little bit longer, even if you feel, I know I can get out there, but are you financially ready to make that step? And if you wait a couple of years, I think you also create discipline in areas too, because you have less time to play with. And so you're getting done what needs to get done in a shorter period of time, which can create some discipline as you move out and away from that actual job, that previous situation. Right. So obviously there's a lot of attorneys out there. What makes your practice unique?
It's not just the area of practice. It's really the depth of knowledge of the attorneys here. I mean, this is what we do. One of the things that we do differently that nobody else does, and you mentioned in the intro that I was a lawyer's lawyer, we put out a series every week. We put out a video on YouTube. We call it like a video podcast, yep. And we embed it in our website. But one thing that we do that I think very, very, very few other lawyers do is we watch what's happening in the law, because the law is a dynamic thing. It's right. Constantly changing. Every week, we're looking at cases that come out of federal courts, and I focus on New York, and my partner and I both work on Florida because that's where a majority of our practice is. Mm-hmm. But we watch and see what the trends in the law are, and then, again, going back to what I was saying, learning from other people's mistakes, when we're digesting those cases in our video blog and our video podcast every week, we say, this is what happened in the case. And by the way, if you're a client out there, or you're the family member of a client, this is what you want the lawyer to do, or this is what you don't want the lawyer to do. This is exactly what they should not be doing. And if you're a lawyer out there, follow this person's example, or don't follow this lawyer's example, because these are the pitfalls, and this is the trend in the law, and this is what you should be looking out for. So we give practice tips, not just to other lawyers, but to also people who are looking for lawyers, and giving them at least some education on what they should be looking for.
Well, it also, you're gaining trust with other people too. So someone's looking for a lawyer and they can watch video of you talking about particular cases. That builds a huge amount of trust. They get to know you. They feel like okay, I'm comfortable with this person, the way they work, what they do. And then also obviously putting more content and knowledge out there, which is, I mean, I think it's so important. I think in our world, content can be marketing, or marketing can be driven by content almost exclusively, but not just for marketing, but we learn more when we're teaching. And like you said, you're learning off your other people's mistakes and experiences as well. So you're giving the opportunity for others to come in and watch that, which is great. So that's a good add to the industry. Thanks.
Yeah, there's also a selfish motive. It's to prevent other people from making mistakes.
Yeah.
So when I come into this, I can have a little bit of an easier time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, that's what we need to do. So, well, listen, anything else you want to add? Any other piece of information or advice you'd like for, let's say, a fledgling attorney or somebody that is in trouble that needs help before we wrap up here?
So the fledgling attorneys out there, do what I did. And find yourself a mentor, someone who is going to not just tell you what to do, but how to do it and why you're doing it. Because if you understand why, you'll understand better how. Right. That's for the fledgling attorneys out there. And to the people out there, really educate yourself before you go out and hire an attorney, so that you know what the process is, because the criminal justice process is completely foreign to people who have never been through it, or have only been through it once or twice. Whereas, someone like me, I'm in it every day, so I get it, right, every day. But you really got to educate yourself and look for the valuable sources of information, not just people trying to hawk their services and masquerading that as real information. You need to look for people that are actually giving real information without saying at the end of that, oh, by the way, hire me.
Right, out of desperation or whatnot. Yeah, and I think, just look at your wall and see that, this is a reflection of the experience that you have in the industry and how long you've been in it. And there could be that one thing that you picked up years ago that someone, that decides, I think I'm going to represent myself, and I'm going to go on to Google and try to learn what I can. But there's all this information that you picked up. It's not just a few videos that they're going to be able to go and access, and then go into a court of law against somebody that has experience in talking in front of a judge. So yeah, I understand when someone's in a situation they can't afford it, but relying on the experts, you go to a doctor when you're sick. If you're in trouble, you need to see a lawyer. I mean, that's just whatever you can do. So
I never represent myself in anything, not even parking tickets. I always hire a lawyer.
Well, it's another. You can get angry, or you can have an emotion about something where someone else is objective and is a different view, or maybe they have experience in that particular area, or they know somebody, it can make a difference, I'm sure. So that's smart.
Precisely.
Well, Patrick, I mean, thanks for your time. It's really valuable. I really appreciate you coming here. And what's the best way for someone to get in touch with you to learn more about your practice?
Best way is to go to our website, which is appealslawgroup.com. You can find us on the web there, or you can find us on our YouTube channel, which is also called Appeals Law Group. We have lots and lots and lots of videos, informational videos that anybody can watch, and it tells you a lot more about not just the law, but also about us as people, because my partner and I were the same guys on camera that we are off camera.
Right. Well, it's one of the things. I saw a video of the two of you introducing yourself and your website, and it really does give somebody a good feel about you and who you are, which is great. So. And good timing on the music. That could actually be some outro music. And we'll make sure we've got a link for your website and your YouTube channel, and anything else you want to share. We'll put that on our site, and then so that anyone that's watching this has a way of reaching out to you and working with you. So, Patrick, I really appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Great talking to you.
Same here.